Alrighty, what is going on? I am Dragon Blitz, and today we are going to be doing a commentated run for the world record speedrun for the reverse boss order category in Castlevania Symphony of the Night. This category is very, very interesting. It's a relatively new development within the greater Symphony of the Night speedrunning community. The idea of it kind of came up kind of as a joke. Somebody joined the speedrun.com leaderboard discussion page and asked why a reverse boss order category doesn't exist. The general consensus is that because Symphony of the Night is a non-linear game, having a direct linear order of bosses to defeat and then doing it in that reverse order didn't quite make sense. So instead, what we did as a community is we decided, well, is there any list of bosses anywhere in the game that is sequential and kind of makes sense for the progression of the game? And it turns out that there is. In the library, specifically, there is a category of purchasable things called the tactics menu. So in that tactics menu, you can buy tactics for how to beat certain bosses. And that tactics menu is always in the same order, regardless of when you fight certain bosses or when you encounter certain bosses. So because that order is the same, we use that order as the order for the reverse boss order, if that makes sense. So the reverse order of that order is what we use to determine how we beat certain bosses. And it does end up creating a route that does end up beating the game pretty much backwards, which is very, very interesting. So with this new development, we have to do a few interesting things. For example, you're already seeing a advanced movement technique called a big toss. When Alucard takes more than 50% of his health in a single hit, he flies across the screen indefinitely until he hits a wall or a ceiling. That's used to move very quickly in the beginning sections of the run, as well as skipping Death. Death is normally in the room right below where we're at now, and if you talk to him, he'll take away your starting gear, your Alucard sword, Alucard shield, dragon helm. All of that powerful stuff would be taken away from the player, but because we skipped past him and he didn't have a chance to actually have that cutscene with us, we get to keep all the powerful gear and move onward. However, this does require that we play in luck mode. It was the name code that we put in at the beginning of the screen. This means our stats are actually pretty bad overall, except for our luck stat, which is at 99. Unfortunately, luck doesn't really matter much in these runs, but essentially working with lower stats overall is beneficial to having access to those big tosses early. Otherwise, we wouldn't have access to them. And what I'm doing right here is I'm setting up my experience such that the next enemy that I defeat will cause a level up. These red skeletons actually don't give you any experience, but this green axe knight off to the side will give me enough experience to cause a level up to happen. And I'm setting up this red skeleton to stand on that switch. I'm going to use the summon spirit to kill the axe knight from a distance. I'm map buffering to find the correct frame. I'm going to walk forward during the level up and then buffer a backdash. This causes a glitch called a reverse shift line. So what it does is essentially skips a screen forward. You saw a screen flash for a second. That screen you're not able to get past. There's like a wall blocking your path. But the reverse shift line essentially underflows your exposition when walking through a screen. So because it underflowed it to a large value instead of like a small value, it ends up doing essentially skipping a screen forward. That's the best way to describe it. It's a very complicated glitch. But by skipping that screen, we get access to that elevator. We can ride the elevator all the way up, and this actually skips the first boss encounter of the run. The boss fight with Sagar and Gaibon. That duo boss is the first boss fight of the run normally in pretty much any other category in Symphony of the Night, but because we're doing reverse boss order, that ends up being the last boss before going to the end sequence. The end sequence of this game does require that we end the game by killing Dracula and then getting the end credits that way. So because that's the way to officially end the run, we don't actually kill the first boss as the last boss. We kill that boss second to last, essentially, and then end the game with the end game credits. Right now, this situation is another experience setup that I'm doing. I'm killing very specific amounts of enemies such that I can guarantee a level up in a very particular spot coming up after this section in the Marble Gallery. This section is a lot of movement. The basic movement technique that you're going to be seeing me do all throughout the run until we get more movement options is shield dashing. Every time I am you're seeing me pull out the shield and moving backwards really fast like that. That is me pressing the backdash button and then right afterwards pressing the shield button, then going back to the backdash button, then shield button, alternating over and over again as quickly as I can. This is another situation where I kill a couple of extra enemies so that way I can set up my experience route. I'm going to be skipping this skeleton a damage boost is the most consistent way to get past him. We're going to shield dash our way to this Diplo right here. Defeat the Diplo for enough experience such that now, no matter what, the next enemy that I kill will give me a level up. And again, we're going to be taking advantage of the fact that level ups freeze the screen to access yet another glitch. But before we can do that, we do need access to an item that is outside of the marble gallery and in the outer wall. It is a garnet. This garnet is a sellable item, and the sellable items in this game can be used for a glitch later on to get a lot of money. So much money, more money than we would ever really need, but it's enough for defeating the game quickly. Here I take off absolutely all of my armor, 0 defense, so that way I can just barely have enough damage from that Axe Knight to cause yet another big toss. I set up my menus such that I am ready for the next glitch I'm going to be executing. I have to backtrack through the marble gallery yet again, and this time I'm going to be avoiding all the enemies again. You can either use spells for invincibility or precise jumps over those plant-type enemies. You can jump on the backs of the Diplos here. Holding my shield out in case they go for the fireball attack, the fireball will get blocked by the shield. And then all of this is so that way we can get into this room with the skeleton that we skipped earlier. I'm going to be doing a setup to get into a pixel-perfect position, avoiding the bones, 2 full backdashes, turn around. I'm going to be map buffering to find the correct frame, the exact frame that the skeleton dies on. I then backdash for 1 frame, and then use my heart refresh item, which is an item that I started with, to also freeze the screen for yet another frame. These 2 actions back to back open a hole in the floor called a shift line. And this does cause a flashing screen effect, which is, obviously annoying, but it is unfortunately required, so that way we can get down into this area way earlier than normal to grab the library card item. This sequence break allows us to get into the library without having to fight the Doppelganger 10 boss. There's normally a boss blocking us from getting able to get access to this area. And then in this section, I'm going to be defeating these flying books because they're mostly just annoying, like they could cause a lot of damage. And then these Durons have a very unique property about them where they will randomly sometimes imbue their sword with like a lightning property, which buffs the sword, causing it to do more damage. And of course, we need them to do more damage so that way we can do yet another big toss. I have to very carefully maneuver my way past that guy so I don't take damage with his buffed up sword. I then get into a very precise position, map buffer to confirm the frame, and then do a large big toss and then bounce off of that platform so I can get enough height to get up here to grab the fairy card. This fairy card is going to be required for that shop glitch I was talking about earlier, that glitch that gets us a lot of money. So now that we have the garnet in our inventory and the fairy card, we can now set up for that shop glitch. So the way that this works is once you summon the fairy will begin to talk to you. So long as her dialogue is overlapping with the librarian's dialogue, there's normally a cutscene here where the librarian talks to you when you meet him for the first time. This allows you to open multiple menus at the same time. I can open my inventory menu, equip the garnet as I am selling it. This subtracts the 0 garnets I currently have in my inventory because I currently equipped it. So it subtracts 1 from 0, underflows the value, giving me 255 garnets instead. And with those 255 garnets, I could sell a bunch of them to buy very powerful items like the Gauntlet, the Duplicator, Mana Prisms, Buffalo Stars, Elixirs. All of these things have a lot of utility. And from here, the Elixir is going to be used to refill my health, so that way I can go for more big tosses if I need to and stay alive. The Elixir also gives me invincibility frames. Right here, you're going to see me use the Elixir to get past these enemies. It gives you almost a full second of invincibility. So one of the faster options, instead of jumping over enemies and avoiding them, is you can just use the Elixir to be invincible for a brief period of time to get past them. And the reason we're able to use the Elixir over and over and over again, it's normally a single-use item, but the Duplicator item that we bought allows us actually infinite uses of single-use items. It's one of the most powerful items in the game for that reason. So all of these single-use items that we got are normally very powerful, but balanced by the fact that once you use it, it's gone forever. But these Elixirs, giving me invincibility and healing me whenever I'm in a tough spot, can be used infinitely, so I'm pretty much at no risk of dying unless I make a very, very big mistake. Here I'm activating the elevator switch so that way I can gain access to the Soul of Wolf relic. I'm going to be resetting the room so that way the Soul of Wolf is closer to me. I'm also grabbing this warp because warps only become active once you've visited them once, except for the very beginning warp at the start of the game near the castle entrance. So now we have the Soul of Wolf. Soul of Wolf is a important movement relic for many reasons. This category takes advantage of almost all of the utility the Soul of Wolf has to offer. So it'll be interesting to showcase some of that later. Here we do have to backtrack through this area yet again because we are now, instead of going back to the area with the skeleton, we're going to be moving past that back to that central clock room where we first met Maria earlier on in the run, because up and to the left of that area is a statue that is in your way every other minute. So long as I've done this section fast enough, the statue will not be in my way. Otherwise, I end up losing about an extra minute. So this run, I ended up being on the correct cycle, which is really, really nice. It's essentially additional free time save. Otherwise, you have to wait for a different cycle, and waiting obviously is slow. Here, I transform into Wolf because after untransforming from the Wolf, you gain access to a dive kick in this game. This is something that the developers didn't intend people to use to gain additional height. But here, I use that dive kick to dive kick off of a candle. I end up in this section of the game much earlier than intended. The Alrox's Quarters is intended to be explored after grabbing the double jump ability, which is in a different part of the castle altogether. Here is yet another big toss. I'm trying to set it up such that it flings me across the entirety of the room. Got a little bit unlucky with some subpixel issues. So essentially, whether you are considered like bonking against that slope or sliding up the slope is kind of random. It's based off of your subpixel position, which you can't really set up properly. But the whole point of doing that big toss is so you can get flung across the room, so you can enter this section right here that has the warp zone. We unlock that warp zone to come back here later. And then we backtrack through this room yet again. Unfortunately, these enemies don't do enough damage to big toss us, so we can't do a big toss on the way back out. And if we did, it would end up being a little bit slower, unfortunately, anyways. Again, taking advantage of all the invincibility to move through enemies very, very quickly. And we're coming up on yet another glitch. Similar to that shift line glitch we did earlier to get the library card early, we're going to be doing yet another shift line. This time, however, we're going to be doing it using a big toss instead of a backdash, and only one screen freeze instead of two. The way that shift lines work is essentially the faster you're moving towards the edge of a screen, the easier it is to set up a shift line, and the number of screen freezes you need is lower. So here I'm setting up a very precise position. I'm setting up such that I will be using a full screen attack, the neutron bomb, on the same at the same time as taking damage from that enemy. So I get big toss, but then the neutron bomb kills the enemy, opens up the shift line, allows me to fall through the floor, and that allows me to get to this area right here that has the form of mist. But it allows me to also skip the boss fight with Minotaur and Werewolf whilst still getting that form of mist. Normally, you have to go around the other way and fight a boss before you're able to get the form of mist. So all these boss skips, again, are important because we are doing a reverse boss order, so we're going to be coming back to fighting Minotaur and Werewolf later, but it is not their time just yet. But before we leave the Colosseum, we do need to very quickly go into this room to grab one of the most important items in the game, chaining spells and potions for full invincibility through that room. Otherwise, we could get absolutely owned by the number of enemies in that room. But we do all this so we can grab the shield rod. The shield rod gives us the ability to imbue our shield with different spells, depending on which shield we have active. But the shield rod plus the Alucard shield is the most powerful combo in the game for doing damage and beating enemies quickly. Doing a little bit of some fast movement up to this area. And we're going to be activating the shield and shield rod, the shield rod plus Alucard shield combo. Putting on a mana prism so we can start refilling our mana, because that is the downside of using this combo, is it does a lot of damage, it makes us invincible, but every time you hold out the shield, you do lose a little bit of magic. My magic bar is slowly going down as I am pulling out the shield to shield dash, so I have to refill it with those mana prisms. Here, I got a little unlucky with this pattern, but this is normally considered a boss in most other categories of this game. However, Symphony of the Night is a very silly game because we're using the tactics menu to determine whether or not to determine the exact order that we fight these bosses in. But for whatever reason, the tactics menu neglects to add Lesser Demon to the boss list, even though every other way that we would determine bosses, Lesser Demon falls into that category. But because we specifically have to use the tactics menu boss order, and Lesser Demon doesn't show up in the tactics menu, it means we can defeat Lesser Demon whenever we want, which is very convenient for us, because by defeating Lesser Demon at this point, we can gain access to the Soul of Bat. There are ways to skip Lesser Demon. It's just very, very slow. We'd have to go out of our way to acquire extra relics to give the wolf faster movement and then clip through the floor to get to the Soul of Bat instead. So by just basically killing Lesser Demon, you save 10 minutes over collecting a bunch of additional relics. And the reason we want to get to the Soul of Bat as quickly as possible is because it is the most powerful relic in the game. It gives us access to the Wing Smash ability. This is an invincible charging tackle that requires a pretty complex input. It's a 3-quarter circle motion on the control stick while holding the jump button, then releasing it at the end. This has to be done every 63 frames. Otherwise, you get forcibly shot out of the input and you're forcibly untransformed. So you have to very carefully time the input to be chained over and over again within about 1 second of each other, while also maintaining your height, because you have full control over your height, both up and down, while in that Wing Smash tackle state. Here we're doing a quick little damage boost to gain some height quickly. More Wing Smashes. We're going to intentionally end some of our Wing Smash chains to refill our magic, because every time we do a Wing Smash, it is a spell that costs 8 magic. So that 8 magic being used over and over again about once per second is very MP intensive. So we have to refill our magic every so often. One thing I'm doing here is this is a mandatory boss encounter. However, we don't actually have to kill this boss. We need to kill this boss later for the reverse boss order. So I'm doing a glitch called a half-blood tech. It's a very silly glitch where if you're in bat form against the wall and then you take enough damage to be sent into a big toss, it just clips you into the floor. So we could use that to skip past the boss. We then acquire the leap stone. We now have the ability to double jump. And now that we have the ability to double jump, we also have the ability to dive kick on command. So we can chain dive kicks into bat transformations to maintain our horizontal momentum like this, because the bat maintains a large percentage of your horizontal momentum during the transformation animation. So it ends up being very, very quick to dive kick into your bat transformation and then transition that into a Wing Smash, utilizing pretty much all of the movement options available to go quickly. It's one of the reasons why I love this game so much as a speedrun. You get to utilize momentum preservation, complex inputs for spells, chaining different movement options together like double jumps and dive kicks and transformations and spells. It's a very, very fun time. Here we have yet another relic that we're going to be getting that improves our movement options. We're going to slowly fly up this shaft, because at the very top of this shaft here is, over to our right, the Gravity Boots relic. This relic gives us the ability for, at the cost of 5 MP, the ability to do a large vertical jump. So any vertical section from now on, we're probably going to be using that gravity jump instead of just flying straight up. Here I'm setting up for a very specific glitch. This is a wolf slope clip. By frame perfectly timing your run and jump into a slope, and then untransforming at the correct frame, you can clip into the floor. We do this to fly across the bottom of the floor to the left, to essentially touch this load zone from out of bounds that forces us down into this area that has the Holy Glasses. This is a key item that allows us to save Richter, and Richter does show up in the tactics menu. So saving Richter from Shaft is required in this run. It's considered a boss encounter for this run. So we're going to grab those Holy Glasses very, very quickly so we can do that. But we're still not done. We're then going to gravity jump through the floor. The gravity jump is actually required to make it through that floor without getting stuck in there. And then I have to reset the room because I messed up the setup here, because you have to kill that Ouija table and then do a frame perfect setup here. We're going to do the same wolf slope clip yet again, but this time instead of going to the left, we're going to go to the right. This touches the caverns, the entrance to the caverns from out of bounds, skipping the need to basically take like a 40-second detour to open a switch that gives us access to the caverns. And the reason we're coming down here is we're essentially beelining it all the way to a very important warp in the underground mines. The mines warp is a pretty important central warp for getting back to the first castle, because we're going to be taking a detour into the second castle. And once we get back to the first castle, the bosses we need to defeat first back in this castle are here in this section of the castle. So access to all of these warps is going to be useful for the boss cleanup at the end of the run. And this section right here, funny enough, because this is being played on the Xbox Live Arcade edition of the game, we have to slowly wait for this Donkey Kong skeleton to throw his barrel and blow up this bridge. But funny enough, if I were playing on the original PlayStation build of the game, you could just blow up the bridge manually by pressing triangle on player 2 if there's a controller plugged into player 2. But the 360 version doesn't have that exploit available, unfortunately. Here I'm saving the game as a safety precaution because this next glitch, if I fail it, is kind of a soft lock in this category. So if I fail it, I will need to reload that save. What I'm doing is I'm attempting to load in the boss door for this fight and then have that boss door crush me and then clip me into the floor. There, I missed it, so I do have to reload, losing a little bit of time, but the save is so close that it is definitely worth it to continue the run onward. So there, I wasn't in the correct spot, and the door pushed me out. It's pretty precise. There is a new setup that has been discovered to make this more consistent since this record has been recorded. So I just barely activate the doors to fall on me, and then stand in the correct spot to get pushed into the floor. And now that I'm in the floor, the Cerberus boss is active, but thankfully for me, I can touch the load zone to escape the room from out of bounds by transforming into Bat. So skipping Cerberus there, yet another boss that we are going to have to deal with later. And this whole section is just to enter this red door, go through this area, get this warp, and that's all we need. We basically have every single warp unlocked now in the first castle. So the cleanup section of the run where we kill all of the bosses back to back to back is going to be a lot faster. And now we can progress towards the second castle of the game. Normally, what you need to do in order to progress through the second castle is to equip the holy glasses and then save Richter. But we actually can't do that here because if we save Richter now, we can't do it in the correct boss order. So what we have to do is we actually have to skip Richter. I do a very precise jump to enter the room in such a way that the game is not aware that I actually entered the room. This means that it has the default state of this room loaded, which thankfully for us happens to be the state where Richter has been saved. This doesn't actually save Richter, but it loads in the cutscene where he's being saved, which ends with Alucard walking over to the edge of the castle, using the teleporter, and then warping to the upside down castle. Now that we're in the second castle, we can essentially just beeline it towards the first boss fight of the run. It's been 20 something minutes, and we're just now finally getting to the point where we can start fighting bosses. But we do still have to skip one more boss fight, I believe. Yes, one more boss fight. This is another spot where saving the game makes sense because this upcoming glitch has the potential to end in death if you mess it up. And dying would ruin the run. So a quick little safety save here. So very similarly to how we did the Half-Blood tech to get clipped through the floor for the Karasamon boss fight, we can actually do that using Medusa. We have her butt push us into the floor, and then we use some potions for extra invincibility frames so that way we don't die while out of bounds. And that allows us to skip Medusa, yet another boss we're going to have to come back for later. And chaining all of these movement options to quickly make it through this section of the run. Very satisfying. This would be a great spot to have donations and such. The only thing that I would note here is that the heart refresh that I just picked up is because I used my heart refresh earlier at the beginning of the run. This just replenishes the heart refresh that I used. And now that I have the duplicator, I won't lose that heart refresh once I use it. But yeah, more solid movement. Great use of the gravity jumps to traverse vertically very, very fast. This is yet another teleporter that we need to acquire, so we can come back here later quickly. More long wing smash chains. Another thing that I didn't know earlier is when you need to change momentum after wing smashing, what I'm doing here is I'm actually transforming into the mist transformation and then quickly transforming into bat. This is called a mist bat. It's a crucial piece of tech to essentially wing smash one direction and then quickly turn around, wing smash another direction, stuff like that. It's a very common use case. And a interesting thing that I'm actually doing here is I'm re-equipping the Shield Rod spell, specifically because I want to defeat these enemies here, because not only are they very scary, but they actually give me a lot of experience. So I think I just gained probably like 15 levels just from killing those enemies in that room. And gaining those levels gives me additional magic to work with. So this essentially is a quick way for me to get enough magic that I can do longer wing smash chains without needing to untransform and then refill my magic. The glitch I'm doing here is yet another reverse shift line. This time it clips me into a ceiling, which gets me past the barrier that normally locks me out of the end of the game, because this is the end of the game right here. I do quickly pick up another heart refresh because that'll be used later. But this end of the game here, funny enough, is our first boss fight of the run. In this reverse boss order category, our first boss is the second to last boss. We can't actually defeat Dracula here because that would end the game. So what I'm doing here instead is I'm defeating Shaft, the second to last boss that leads into Dracula. And now, pretty much the only way to get out of this sequence without dying or like quitting out of the game, the only way to continue the gameplay from here is to warp out of this area using a library card, because at any time in the game, so long as you are actionable and on the ground, you can use a library card to just warp back to the library. So warping back to the library here to not defeat Dracula, because if we defeat Dracula, it's the end of the game. And now we have to backtrack back to the second castle again, so that way we can go towards the next boss in the boss order, which is Galamoth. And that's going to be pretty interesting. It's going to require its own additional set of glitches to get there, because Galamoth is guarded by a different boss, Death, so we're going to have to find a way to skip past Death. And during this backtrack session, it's yet another good time to have donations and such. One thing that's important to note is, even though I skipped past Richter the first time, every time you go in between the castles, you do have to skip Richter again. Otherwise, it will still load in that boss fight with Richter, where he's controlled by Shaft. So you have to do the same wolf jump that clips, or that gets you into the room, to skip past that trigger to load in that boss fight. So I think in this run, I end up doing 3 different Richter skips before eventually fighting him. Spoilers for later. And this is why we got that warp earlier, is because now I can utilize this warp room to warp directly to the inverted Aurochs's quarters. And it saves me a lot of backtracking, probably a handful of minutes if I had to backtrack normally. And again, we have to backtrack through this section using pretty much normal movement means. This would be another great time to just, you know, get some donations out there as we move towards the inverted caverns, because that's when things start to get spicy again. From here, this is another great section to show off some cool movement, utilizing the gravity jumps and then transforming into Bat to cancel some momentum and preserve horizontal momentum. Otherwise, if you gravity jump into a ceiling, you just bonk and you lose all of your momentum and you're locked out for a second. Another thing that's important to note is during the transformation animation, you are invincible for a short period of time, so you can get past enemies by dive kicking and then transforming into bat, because that transformation is invincible. And then here we're in the underground, the inverted mines. And beyond this point is the boss fight with Death. There are two ways you could skip past Death. This is the older route where we have to activate the cutscene with Death and then use a library card yet again to leave the boss fight, because that cutscene prevents the Death skip we're going to be doing. So this is yet another instance of backtracking. Instead of doing backtracking, however, there is a different skip that requires using both heart refreshes to essentially do a camera shift glitch that forces you out of bounds, but it does take about 2 minutes to perform. You're essentially just looking at the heart refresh animation over and over again for 2 minutes. They're both very valid and both decent ideas for speedrunning this category. I believe the heart refresh version was timed to be faster. But both glitches are interesting in their own right. This one does require some backtracking, which has its downsides, but it is what it is. So either if we were watching the heart refresh animations or doing the backtracking, this is yet another time that would be great for donations. Yet another Richter skip. You've seen it before. And then again, utilizing that warp. Yeah, this is probably the biggest backtrack in the entirety of the category. It's one of the reasons why other methods for skipping Death have been looked into. I think if I were to do this run in the future, I would utilize the heart refresh version. There's a similar glitch that happens later that explains the heart refresh trick at the very end of the run, so I'll explain it there when it comes up. Because this is quite a bit of backtracking. So to recap, the whole reason we're doing all this backtracking is because we need to skip Death. The reason we need to skip Death is because this is a reverse boss order run. The order in which we kill these enemies is predetermined for this run. We've already defeated Shaft, the second to last boss. And then we are going in the reverse order from there, according to the boss tactics menu. The reason why it's so hard to find an accurate boss order is because the game is so open, especially once you get to the second castle. You can fight the bosses in essentially any order you want. So utilizing that boss tactics menu is pretty much required if we want to have a order that makes any sort of sense and isn't 100% arbitrary, just made up for the sake of it being made up. And now that we're back here in the inverted mines, gotta very carefully make my way back to the death fight. But before we do that, again, I'm going to be saving the game because this next trick, if I fail it, would be a soft lock. So because of that, we do need to make sure that we give ourselves a fair chance. So what I'm trying to do is very, very similarly to what we did with the Cerberus boss skip, where the boss doors came down from the ceiling and then pushed us out of bounds. I'm trying to do the same exact thing. It's just a little bit trickier in this room because you have to dive kick into position instead of backdashing into position. so the triggers are a little bit trickier. But I get it on the second try, which is pretty decent. And then I have to hold left the entire time. Otherwise, these scythes will hit me from out of bounds. And that is also a soft lock. Because if you take damage while you're falling out of bounds, you just are in this damage state forever. It's just a forever stun lock. And now that we are past death, we can do some movement to quickly make our way to the inverted catacombs. Because here in the inverted catacombs is finally the second boss fight of the run, 35 minutes in. We got to make our way to Galamoth. Here, I have to do the Alucard Shield spell yet again to apply the shield damage. And the damage is quite large, but Galamoth's health pool is also very large. I believe he has 12,000 HP. And the shield does 255 damage per every 6 frames. So it's a lot of damage very quickly, but Galamoth also just has a ton of HP. Way too much, if you ask me. And now we get to kind of like the boss rush section of the run. We've done all the prerequisite glitches aside from maybe a handful more. And we have access to all of the bosses. So now it is just a movement showcase between the bosses in that reverse order. So the next boss fight we're going to be fighting is Beelzebub or Beelzebub, however you want to say it. The game actually spells it both ways, depending on which menu you're looking at, which is very funny. I always like to call him Beelzebub. Most likely it was a translation slash error of some kind, spelling error. So yet again, warping to the inverted Olrox's quarters because it is the, it's kind of like the central point of the castle. So you can go from here to any other boss relatively quickly, which is quite nice. Here we are going to use the inverted Coliseum as essentially just a hallway to move through very quickly. There is a boss fight here that we're going to be coming back to later. But again, this whole section is just following the reverse boss order from here, going from point A to point B as quickly as I can, utilizing all the movement options that I can very quickly. Funny enough, this is a blue door that's going to be coming up right here. And the only reason we're able to move through this blue door is because we purchased the Jewel of Open earlier in the run. And if I remember correctly, that's the only time we open a blue door at all. It's the only use case for having the Jewel of Open. Otherwise, we'd be able to skip it. But it was purchasable in the shop, and we had essentially infinite money, so there was no reason not to. That boss fight's really, really cool, because what you do there is you actually hold the shield out while being invincible after the wing smash to get up to Beelzebub. And then we dive kick off of his body as it is essentially dying to maintain the height required to do enough damage to stay inside him to kill him quickly, which is really, really cool. I am now backtracking through the section that we just moved through because, like I said earlier, the Coliseum did have its own boss that we needed to defeat, and now they are up next. It is the evil Castlevania 3 trio. We got ourselves Ralph Belmont, the Japanese translated name Ralph Belmont, Sypha, and Grant, except they're like evil and fake or whatever. But again, Alucard Shield doing lots of damage. Because we have access to the most powerful damage basically in the game, the boss fights themselves aren't really challenges outside of just optimizing, having the shield inside of the bosses as quickly as possible for as long as possible until they are dead. It comes down to, this category is a lot about executing the glitches early on and then all of the movement in between the bosses. That's where all of the time save really comes in to play, and that's where the majority of the core gameplay is for this type of category. Next up is Doppelganger 40. He is called Doppelganger 40 because he is level 40 in game. All enemies and bosses do have their own like level, and that determines how much experience you gain from them depending on your level. So the level difference between you and the enemy determines how much experience you get, essentially. But because Doppelganger shows up twice, they decided to name him Doppelganger 10 because he's level 10 on his first encounter, and then Doppelganger 40 because he's level 40 in this encounter. But there's something very interesting about killing Doppelganger 40 before killing Doppelganger 10 in this game. They seem to be like soul linked in the game's code in a weird way, such that if you kill Doppelganger 40 before killing Doppelganger 10, the game considers Doppelganger 10 also dead, and he won't spawn. And if you check the time attack menu, which is a way to determine if a boss has been defeated or not, there's a time attack menu that tells you when in game time you defeated a specific boss. It'll show that Doppelganger 40 and Doppelganger 10 both die at the same exact time in that menu. So again, this reverse boss order is a little bit tricky because we have to skip Doppelganger 10, because if you kill Doppelganger 40 in the appropriate spot, it also kills Doppelganger 10. So for that reason, it's mostly reverse boss order. It's as good as we can get because this game is very silly. Oh, remember this guy? Yeah, so we're finally killing him. It's finally his turn. And look how quickly we killed him. We went through like 5 minutes of backtracking to skip him just to kill him in like 20 seconds. Less than that, 10 seconds. And thankfully for us, there is a warp right here, very, very close by. And we can utilize this warp to go to the next boss, creature, which is on the other side of the castle, essentially. And yet again, this inverted Alrox's Quarters warp, being close to the center of the castle, will save us some time. The other thing that's interesting about this category is that there is probably room for reroutes, especially in the second castle. The castle is very open, and the different routes you can take is... I don't think they've all been tested to see exactly which one is exactly the fastest, so it's very possible that this backtracking section could be optimized by taking a different route. Same can be said for a lot of the other routes. Because you have so many options that are... very, very close together, it's hard to tell which one is exactly optimal, which gives you kind of a little bit of freedom when it comes to choosing which route you want to take, which I think is quite nice. And all of this movement is so we can get to creature, to kill him in 2 seconds, and move on. Yet another instance where having access to teleporters next to a boss is very convenient, especially because we have to... we would have to do a lot of backtracking otherwise, but right down here, after falling down all of these steps, is this red door, which leads to yet another warp zone. Utilizing this warp that we got pretty early on. And then eventually moving off to the right. Because we are finally fighting Medusa. We skipped her earlier, but now she has been defeated. One thing that is important to note, a lot of these bosses normally have relics that they drop. These Vlad relics both increase the player's stats and are are used to open up the end of the game, but because we can do that reverse shift line glitch to get to the end of the game whenever we want to, the relics aren't necessary, and because we're doing so much damage with the Alucard shield, increasing our stats isn't necessary either. So the intended way that you beat the game is by collecting all of these 5 Vlad relics to get to the end of the game, but we don't actually need to do that. We skip all of them. Here's Akmadon. He wants to give us a hug, but unfortunately, we pull out the shield and defeat him. His death animation takes like 30 seconds, even though he was only on screen for like 2 seconds. And now from here, we only have 1 boss fight left in the first castle. Normally, the first boss fight that you would encounter in the first castle. It's very, very close to the beginning. But we got to warp there real quick. Yeah, and during a lot of these movement sections, just going between bosses, yet another fantastic time to have donations and such for a marathon run. And finally, we make it over here to defeat Darkwing Bat. Again, another boss that goes down in less than a second. We then quickly leave the way that we came. And now we can finally go back to the first castle and clean up all of the bosses there. But before we clean up those boss fights, we do actually have to save Richter. But because we're backtracking from here, we have to deload the room and then backtrack back into it. This loads in the boss fight with Richter. This is what would have happened if we never did the Richter skip all of those times before. So what I do is I quickly put on the Holy Glasses and then do a couple spells to defeat the Shaft Orb, saving Richter, allowing us to then essentially just get out of here. Because we already did the other cutscene that moves us into the second castle, we don't have to watch that cutscene again. Very, very convenient. And now we can finally warp back to the mines in the first castle. We skipped past Cerberus all that time ago, so that way we can quickly warp back here once we return back to the first castle. So we don't have to do Cerberus skip again. We instead just use the warp. And now we can go through the regular catacombs to reach the next boss in the reverse boss order, which is Granfaloon. I do have to reapply the shield spell here. There are a few things that cancel the shield spell, specifically unequipping the shield, or going into specific cutscenes that reload Alucard into the game will unapply the shield rod spell. Other than that, the shield spell is pretty much active until you either run out of magic or you've held the shield out for, I believe, 255 full seconds, which is never going to happen in a speedrun because the bosses die so fast. There's no reason to hold the shield out that long. So pretty much it'll only ever go away if I don't manage my MP well, or if I mess up. Sorry, if a cutscene happens that deletes the shield effect from me, or if I unequip the shield, which has happened a few times. One thing that's useful about the first castle is that we can now utilize library cards to get around relatively quickly. So there's a couple of boss fights where after we defeat the enemy, we're going to use the library card to warp to the library. And right next to the library is a relatively quick load for a warp zone. So then we can start warping around the castle to go towards the different bosses that we need to clean up. For example, here, with a little bit of movement mistake, we eventually make it back to Alrox's quarters. And all this is to fight the next boss, Alrox. And stop me if you heard this one before. We're going to be using the shield rod and the shield spell to kill him real fast. Yeah, the end of this run really is just movement. Movement between the bosses, routing is important. Using warps, using library cards. From here, we kill Aurochs and then backtrack to the warp zone. This little warp room is going to take us back to the mine, so that way we can finally defeat Cerberus. We saw this guy like 30 minutes ago, and it's finally his time. This room's really awkward. There's not like a great option for getting through that room quickly. And finally, we pet the dog one last time. And then we quickly move on to the next boss fight, which is going to be against Succubus. And during these movement sections, pretty much, you can probably just do, honestly, donations through most of them. There's not anything new really going on. It's all just movement mechanics that we've explained earlier in the run. Here we have to activate this cursed-looking save room type thing. This warps us into the boss arena versus Succubus in the Nightmare. And again, she goes down very, very quickly. And from here, I immediately library card yet again to get out of this area quickly. More backtracking through the library. Going back to the warp room. One thing that's also important to note about these warp rooms is they do kind of work on a cycle. So they all work counterclockwise around the castle. So if you're in one section of the castle, it'll move you to the next one in a counterclockwise motion every time you warp once. So one thing that's nice about the library warp is that it warps you to Castle Keep immediately afterwards. And that's where Karasamon happened to be, which is very nice. And then from here, we're at the top of the castle in Castle Keep, and then we can move down and to the right to Aurox's quarters, which is right next to the Minotaur and Werewolf boss fight. So we're going to go beat them up right now. So taking advantage of the warp cycle to save time. Otherwise, you have to watch the warp animation over and over and over again as you move through the cycle. Can be quite annoying. Here, funny enough, we can use the mist to enter the boss arena earlier than intended, because normally you're supposed to come from the other side. Yeah, these bosses, they don't stand a chance versus the Alucard shield. They really don't. Then from here, we have yet another boss fight in the caverns. So we're going to be backtracking from this section to the caverns very, very quickly. There, I attempted to go for like a little ceiling zip that gets you out of bounds. It's frame perfect and kind of silly. If you get it, you save like 4 seconds. If you don't, you just move on. It's not worth trying to set up over and over again. There's a lot of like neat little movement and glitch mechanics that exist like that in this game that save a little bit of time. But because we need to get into the caverns, we actually, it's in our best interest to do this floor clip yet again. Otherwise, we'd have to go around this area and take like a 40-second detour to open up the entrance to the caverns because we never did that legitimately. So yet again, we clip into the stairs. And every one of those floor clips is requires multiple frame perfect inputs. That's why I'm pulling up the map to help me confirm which positions I'm in. But yeah, all of this is to go back to the caverns. It looks like I actually went the wrong way in this run. That's very funny. Thankfully, I'm almost 8 minutes ahead. So this still ended up being world record. Yeah, this world record happened very quickly into the lifespan of this category, and then there wasn't much competition for it, so I don't think it's been optimized much since. But I can see a world where a lot more optimization could happen in routing, and then just execution as well. The glitches are very difficult to execute, so this run, doing pretty much all of them first try is quite good. And then here we just have to defeat Scylla, and then immediately library card out. And again, backtrack through the library yet again. Good time for donations, etc., etc. That is the one thing about this route, is there's a lot of backtracking. But I feel like that's, you know, understandable considering we're stuck doing a very strict boss order. And doing it in the reverse intended order. Another convenient spot where the warp cycle works out, where just going to the left from the Castle Keep warp leads directly to the chapel. And then going from the chapel to the left leads to the next boss fight versus Hippogriff. This is a neat little optimization where you dive kick into the room, transform into bat, and then as you're untransforming, you pull out the shield to essentially allow yourself to get the shield in contact with the boss as soon as possible. There's a couple boss fights where that dive bat tech is used. And now that we've defeated Hippogriff, this would be the spot where we would go beat Doppelganger 10. However, he isn't here right now. He's dead. So instead, we go to Slogger and Gaibon. The first boss skip of the run is finally catching up. We're finally catching up with Slogger and Gaibon after we skipped them initially. And we just chase them down with the shield. And they are defeated. We then library card because there's no reason to be here anymore. We would just want to leave as quickly as possible. Fun thing that does happen, however, is you do get the life max up animation after the life max up spawns on top of you during the library card. So it delays the animation until after the library card, which is very funny. I actually, you know what? After watching that back, I know of a way to skip that animation and save like 90 frames. I'm going to have to do that when I eventually beat this world record. Inevitably when I start practicing this. That's very funny. You could just go to the right, and then you end up in a spot where the life max up can't spawn on top of you, and then you library card. Although, is it worth it? Yeah, probably. I don't know. Either way, routing aside, this is probably another relatively long backtrack. It's not too bad, but we have to go back to the second castle for the last time. Here we don't have to skip Richter because he's already been saved, so we don't have to worry about doing a Richter skip at all. We just go straight to the second castle using this warp. And now we have to go back to the center clock room where we fought Shaft, do the skip again, the relic skip where we do the reverse shift line and then fly across the ceiling. We have to do that one more time, and then we can finally end on the final glitch of the run, which is Shaft skip. Because in this run, we already defeated Shaft, but Shaft will always be there no matter what. The game never gets rid of Shaft. So the only way to skip, the only way to get to Dracula now without killing Shaft again, which is against the rules, because it would break the boss order, because you would technically be killing Shaft at the beginning and then killing Shaft again after killing Slugger and Gaibon. So in order for the rules of this category to be upheld, we have to skip past Shaft. And this is the camera glitch that I was talking about earlier that can be implemented versus Death, but wasn't in this run. It does get implemented in this scenario to skip past Shaft. And it's going to be very clear why utilizing this glitch doesn't happen very often, and you want to avoid doing it as much as possible unless absolutely necessary. But before that, we do have to do the reverse shift line right here. Just have to line up in a pixel perfect position. Walk forward, use the heart refresh. Go through the screen transition after backdashing. This underflows my X position, warps me past the save room that was blocking my path into the ceiling, warps me into that next save room by wing smashing in a specific spot. Then I take the elevator up. Now from here, Shaft is above us, but we can't actually interact with Shaft. So what I'm doing here is I'm equipping 2 heart refreshes, 1 on each hand, which is absolutely required. You need 2 heart refreshes for this glitch to work. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to dive kick in a specific spot very early on, catching the dive kick as it's landing on the ground. This causes a front slide where you slide across the ground for a little bit after dive kicking into the ground. And I'm using that horizontal momentum to push me along the ground, and I'm essentially using a heart refresh back to back, swapping off between hands, because you can buffer heart refreshes out of heart refreshes if you use the alternate hand. So what I'm doing here is I'm holding down the left hand button to use a heart refresh. And then during that animation, I'm buffering the next one by holding down the right hand button. Then I swap to the left hand button. I do this over and over and over again, I believe 17 times. The only downside is that every heart refresh animation costs like 5 seconds. So it's a lot of time loss to do this animation over and over and over and over again. And on top of that, in this run, very, very unfortunately, my positioning was ever so slightly off. So I do all of this, and then I end up not getting in the exact position that I need to afterwards to do the shaft skip. I could have fixed it by doing 1 extra heart refresh animation. Normally I count to 17, but if I was aware in the moment that my positioning was off, I could have done 18 instead, and it would have saved me from having to essentially redo the glitch again. During this section, it takes so long. Yeah, here I'm too far to the right, and I can't fly up from here, so I'm stuck. I needed to be pushed farther to the left. So I have to, thankfully, reload the area by zipping out of bounds a little bit and then going back up. So I lost a lot of time doing this, but it's something that you can retry. It doesn't soft lock the game or anything like that if you mess it up. It's a bit of time loss, but, you know, the trick is difficult. You have to get, like, essentially a frame-perfect dive kick into the ground and then count the heart refreshes properly as well. And do it in the correct position. But yeah, yet again, another time to essentially just have donations or whatever going on, because there's not much to do here except count heart refreshes. It's lots of fun. This glitch is silly. This is essentially what I would be doing in the death room to get clipped into the floor, to skip past death instead of doing the backtracking. And I think it ends up saving a little bit of time too. if done optimally, if you get it done correctly on the first try. I'm gonna have to look into that. There is still optimizing potential for sure, but the category is just very, very hard. The early game is so glitch dense and glitch heavy that you, a lot of runs don't even make it this far, which is why the end game hasn't been fully optimized. Another thing that's important to note is that this category got optimized up to this point. This world record exists because there was a bounty for it, and there wasn't really like much incentive to optimize outside of just clearing the bounty time and getting a good bounty time. I think I was the only one that submitted for the bounty as well, but yeah, now that we're out of bounds in the correct position, we fly up the left side, and then on the left side is the load zone. There's just a load zone you can touch from out of bounds. That just gets you to this boss fight with Dracula, which is lots of fun. One last time, because I had to unequip the shield rod and the Alucard shield, we use the shield rod spell one more time to do a ton of damage to Dracula very quickly, defeating the game in the reverse intended order, ending on the final boss Dracula with the end credits. This is a cool run. It's a lot of fun. It's a long one. There's a lot of downtime, which doesn't happen a lot in Symphony of the Night runs. Usually Symphony of the Night runs, there is so much going on at all times that there's basically no downtime to, like, you know, allow for breathing, especially when it comes to commentary. But I think this is one of the more interesting and silly speedruns that exist for this game, so I'm always happy to show it off. Yeah, it was fun. Thank you.